What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of C2C Live. If you're new to the channel, hit that like and subscribe button. We are trying to get to 3,000 subs. We're not supported by CBS, NBC, ESPN, any of those big name companies. It's just you guys supporting us. We are here to talk college football and some college fantasy football, and we obviously have to talk the national championship. Congratulations to that team up north. I'm just kidding. Congratulations to Michigan for winning a national championship. I believe the first one since 1998, which was technically shared with Nebraska, and the first outright one for a very, very long time. So congratulations to all the Wolverines fans, all over the world. Well deserved. To the butt kicking by Georgia, to the, let's be honest, kind of embarrassing loss of TCU. You were able to go out there and beat two very good teams in Alabama and Washington to claim that national title. We'll talk a little bit about Michael Penix Jr. and J.J. McCarthy, kind of the key figures in that game last night, both being discussed as possible NFL quarterbacks. We'll give you guys my opinion on that. We'll talk about Ohio State landing Quinshon Judkins, which, let's just be honest, too, on that, guys. You got to love the rivalry part of that, of as soon as Michigan is, like, winning the national championship, Ohio State announces that they land Judkins in the transfer portal. That's just peak college football right there for you. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about a couple NFL draft declarations that happened earlier today. Jaden Maava picked a landing spot, an intriguing one to me. And then last but not least, I will talk about the 2024 playoff field and my pick of what the not only playoff field is going to look like, but who I think is going to win the 2024 national championship. It's going to be interesting. I'm kind of excited to see what you guys think about this, and let me know in the comments who you guys think is going to win the 2024 national championship, who you think is going to, even if it's just who you think is going to win each conference, the Big 12, the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 10, as we're kind of moving to this Power 4 now with, the Pac-12 is technically not dead from what I'm told, but I don't have a lot of great teams. So let's start with the game last night. If you didn't join us, make sure to turn the notifications on, as Felix and myself, we had a great time last night. Practically jumped on from kickoff to a little bit into the third quarter. One of our Devi leads, Mike Valerie, joined us. Chris Moxley jumped on as well, and we just kind of watched the game with you guys and talked about it. But Michael Penix, I thought he was going to be a key reason why the Washington Huskies won the national championship. They did not. They lost 34-13. Michael Penix was 27 of 51 for 52% completion percentage, just 255 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, a QBR of 63. And we kind of saw where Penix struggles. There's been a lot of talk over the past couple months about him being like locked in as a first-round draft pick, top 10 draft pick. Now there were mocks today dropping him out of even the first round. I really don't know what to think about Michael Penix, but we did get to see the issues in his game going up again against a very good defense. Michigan was number 6 in the nation against the pass, number 1 defense overall. I don't want to cut them short for what they were. They were a very good team. But Penix yesterday really struggled in getting that passing game going. He struggled going anywhere in the middle of the field. He was missing high a lot. I know Rome Odunze came out on and talked about how he felt it was his fault that they didn't get that 4th down play. I thought that was Michael Penix's. Even if Rome Odunze should have broke out to the outside, he was wide open. Michael Penix didn't. Michael Penix could have hit him in stride. Rome Odunze could have then just turned around and ran for a touchdown. We could have hit him in the chest, and Odunze still would have had time to turn all the way around and run for a touchdown. To me, that throw was 100% on Michael Penix. He also missed Rome Odunze in the end zone after he created a couple yards of separation where they ended up having to kick a field goal on that first drive for Washington. Just missed a couple plays, and we've seen that over the past couple years. He tends to miss high, and I think a lot of that, Felix has talked about it on this network. His footwork is just not good. It's not, and it hasn't been since his time at Indiana. Not only does he miss high, I feel like at times, especially in last night's game, he flushed out of the pocket a little bit too much. I feel like his pocket manipulation is very underrated. He does a very good job of avoiding the rush by stepping up and dumping the ball off or getting the ball out. I mean, obviously, he is probably one of the strongest arms in all of college football. And will going into the NFL as well. He fires an absolute missile when he lets that thing go. I did see a lot more anticipation throws from him this year, which I did like. There was one in the Texas game specifically, and I want to say it was to Jalen Polk or I think it's actually Jalen McMillan, because he did the gun celebration in Texas's face, I think after Quinn Ewers and all them did it, where he fired it in between 2 defensive backs. I mean, any second later, that's probably picked off. He has had a good year, but I said it a couple weeks ago on C2C Live, and I might have even said it on Devi Debate. No, I know I said it on Devi Debate because Felix wasn't with me. I still have questions about his game. If you look at his overall college career, and I'm not just talking about the injuries, which I do think NFL teams will look at. I mean, he's missed multiple years due to injuries, not just to his ACLs, but also to his shoulder as well. When Kalen DeBoer was not calling plays for this guy, his completion percentage was, guess what? Right around the 52% mark that it was last night against Michigan. And I'm not saying that this should all be on Kalen DeBoer and that Michael Penix hasn't grown. He has. He's not the same player that he was at Indiana when he had that 52% completion percentage. I think it was 53 and 56 to be respectable there. When Kalen DeBoer was not at Indiana. But I also think you have to take into account that he had arguably an elite play caller and arguably the best wide receiver core in all of college football around him the past 2 years. Rome Odunze is going to be a first-round pick. I don't know if he's going to be top 10. We had a discussion about that last night on the live show. Jalen McMillan at worst is going to be probably a day 2 pick, and possibly even Jalen Polk. This conversation is Jalen Polk is better than Jalen McMillan. He had the best wide receiver core in all of college football the past 2 seasons. That has to count for something. Now, he has an NFL tool, and that is his arm. And that I think can win him some favor with NFL in the NFL circles with GMs and head coaches, and I think we'll get him drafted. Probably in the first round. I don't know that I would take him in the first round because I will stand with what I said last year about another quarterback that had a really strong arm, but I think struggled with some things. That was one, Will Levis. And I'm not trying to say Michael Penix is Will Levis. I think Michael Penix does a much better job of reading the game, knowing where to go with the football when his first read is not there. I do see him going through his read, something Will Levis struggled with. And I do think that Michael Penix's accuracy down the field is much better than Will Levis. There were times that Will Levis was just throwing that thing down there and hoping the wide receivers went up and get it. I have seen throughout this year Michael Penix lead his wide receivers into open space, throw wide receivers open. As I mentioned earlier, anticipation throws. The biggest one coming to my head was the one against Texas last week. But he has done a lot of back shoulder throws to Rome Odunze as well. So he has the accuracy downfield, which I think will lead him to be a first-round pick. Do I think he is a top 10 pick? I do not. I think Caleb and Drake both go in the top 10. Penix probably goes somewhere in the 20s. I talked about this a little bit last night on the live show. I think he is probably in that like Kenny Pickett range. We're a team that maybe they move up to get him, something like that. I don't think he goes top 10, but at the end of the day, I do think he ends up going in the first round. I mean, look, I was looking at this the other day. There's 10 teams, I think, in the NFL that need quarterbacks. And I know that we haven't seen it quite as much over the past few years, but honestly, throughout most of the NFL history, teams reach on their quarterbacks because these GMs and these coaches believe in themselves and think we can make this guy work in our system. And I think someone's going to see that arm and they're going to say, and he's a little bit on the older side again. I think he is very savvy when it comes to football intelligence. They're going to be a coach and a GM that look at him and say, we can make this dude work in our system. And so I think he's going to go in the first round. Whether or not I think he deserves that, I'll save that opinion for a later time when people like Felix can debate me on it. But I do think he will go in the first round, whether I agree with that or not. The other player that has kind of been discussed, I don't know about first round pick, but has gotten some buzz for what he was been doing toward the end of the year, and that's J.J. McCarthy. 10 of 18 for last night for 55% completion percentage, 140 passing yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, a QBR of 58.4. That's worse than Michael Penix, winning quarterback. Worse than the other one. With like half the attempts too, less than like a third of the attempts. That's that. Did have some rushing yards. Picked up a massive play for Michigan late in that third quarter with that. I think it was like a 3rd and 13. Picks up a big first down for them. He's not a first round pick, folks. He's not. You can tell me all day he is. I just don't see it. He is far too inconsistent. I also think, and I tweeted this out as well, I think it kind of says something about what your coaching staff thinks about you as well, is when you're in the third quarter of a dogfight in a game that you should have blown Washington out. The final score here is not indicative of what the actual game looked like. I know Michigan won 34-13. It was not that far away going in. I think it was like 5 minutes into the fourth quarter. Yeah, it was actually 4 minutes into the fourth quarter. Michigan finally scored that late touchdown. And that's because I was like, well, Washington's not coming back. I'm going to bed. This was a close game in the third quarter when Michigan, let's be honest, should have been blowing Washington out. They should have. They were dominating on the lines of scrimmage. And for whatever reason in the third quarter, they decided, hey, we're going to let J.J. McCarthy throw it a little bit. we're going to see what this kid's got. And he embarrassed himself. That was not a good performance at all. He's far too inconsistent. And as I said, I think it says something in the biggest games of Michigan's season, this game and the Penn State game, and honestly, sometimes against Ohio State as well. They did not want him passing in crucial situations. They were like, we'll figure out a way to pick this up all on the ground with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, who both had very good games. In the Rose Bowl specifically, and in this game, he was bailed out multiple times by Roman Wilson, who made great catches in those games. One big one in this game where he had to reach behind him for a first down to catch it, and there was two in that Rose Bowl game. One where if he just hits Roman Wilson in stride, Roman Wilson scores like a long touchdown, and that is another reason why Alabama stayed in that game. He does seem, though, to have that one play a game that gives you some hope. And this one, it was that perfectly placed NFL throw. It was an NFL throw to Roman Wilson. I want to say it was like 30, 40 yards down the field, placed it perfectly over the defensive back, right in stride to Roman Wilson. And then to me, the Cornelius Johnson throw in the game against Alabama, where he was flushed out to his right, threw just an absolute dart to the sideline where only Cornelius Johnson could catch it. And Cornelius Johnson did make a great catch on it, but still, he had to put it there for him. He has those plays, and I think that's what gives you the hope that he can make it work, but I just don't see it. To me, it doesn't seem like he trusts himself at times, especially when he's got that pressure around him. And I know you can say, well, every quarterback struggles with pressure around him. That's true. But when he's flushed out and there's traffic around his feet, the one thing he does not do that like the best in the NFL and in college football do is they reset their feet and fire that ball. He does not. He seems to rush everything. Even when he doesn't have that traffic around him, I feel like J.J. McCarthy rushes his throws. I feel like his base, his footwork is barely ever aligned with what his upper body is doing, which is why I think a lot of his throws should be picked off or thrown behind wide receivers or not placed right, whether it needs to be the back shoulder leading a wide receiver. He just kind of chunks it at him and hopes for the best. His eyes also, in my opinion, tend to drop a lot when he gets that pressure in him. And that's the one thing Penix does not do. Now, Penix is not the rushing threat that J.J. McCarthy is, but C.J. Stroud didn't do that either. The best quarterbacks, when that pressure is there, they find a way to step up or flush up, but they never take their eyes off downfield so they know where their wide receivers are. Too often do I see J.J. McCarthy's eyes dip, and at that point, once you're trying to reset yourself, you're trying to reanalyze what's going on the field, and you're just wasting more and more time, which is anywhere I think he starts to rush himself even more, and it just ends up playing bad. He's got to learn to keep his eyes up and focus downfield. Now, get it. It's easy for me to say that, be, the armchair quarterback. Then you're right. I'm not going to be the quarterback that J.J. McCarthy is. That's just what I see when I watch him play. To me, that's not a first-round quarterback. It's not a second-round quarterback. Corey Pereira, our Devy lead here at Camps to Kent, said recently he kind of compares him to Russell Wilson and some of the things that he did. I think that's a lofty comparison, if you want me to be honest. I think that's like his ceiling. Russell Wilson has this ability to like fire these moonshots that seem to hang up in the air forever, but at the same time not, and just like perfectly land to all his wide receivers. And he also seems to make these big plays consistently. I've not seen that from J.J. McCarthy. And maybe some of that is on the offense, and Jim Harbaugh, and I think Sharon Moore, if I'm saying his name correctly, who just kind of run the offense, asking J.J. to do what he's good at. And so we don't ever get to see J.J. outside of his comfort zone because Michigan doesn't want that. But that also could be indicative of what just J.J. McCarthy is. I don't know if he's going to go to the NFL this year. We'll talk a little bit about it and where I have Michigan in the playoffs. Spoiler alert, I do think they make the playoffs next year. I do think Harbaugh probably goes. There's just too much smoke now at this point to believe he's not going to the NFL, and he has nothing left to accomplish in college, in my opinion. I mean, we saw what he was able to do at Stanford with Andrew Luck, and while he never made it to the playoff and won a national championship, he has done that now. He's done something for Michigan they haven't done in a long time. And that's not only win a national championship, but also win the Rose Bowl, which is still a very big thing to Big Ten schools. So to have those in his final season, I think it's the perfect send-off for him. Like there's nothing else left for him to accomplish at the college level. I think he wants to go back to the NFL and try and get that Super Bowl that eluded him. He talked a little bit about that last night in his press conference. I did see part of it where now he gets like sit at the big boy table because he's finally won a championship. He wants a Super Bowl. I think he's going to the NFL. If he goes to the NFL, would not be surprised if JJ follows. Because I don't know that JJ wants to come back to probably a new coaching staff. Maybe they just promote Sharon more. I don't know what Michigan would do. But maybe JJ just says, hey, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go. And if he does, I think at best we're looking at a third-round pick. And the only reason I say that is I don't think he is a much worse prospect than Malik Willis and Desmond Ridder. I don't think the arm is there compared to what Desmond Ridder and Malik Willis had, but I think he's probably a more consistent package than those two. Both those drafted in the third round a couple years ago. Not saying those were good picks, but like if I had to compare him to like a range, it would probably be that. I think someone takes a shot on him in the third round. Maybe he wins you a couple fantasy games here and there because he goes in and starts as your quarterback, gets injured, but I just don't ever see him being a franchise guy or a guy that NFL teams build around. Quinshon Judkins goes to The Ohio State University. I just dropped a video on it. I mean, I've got to go get myself a jersey now, I think. I've been talking about Quinshon since, I think, like November of 2020 or 2021, like before we even knew we were going to do a freshman guide. Austin and myself did a freshman video, and I talked about him being in my top 10 running backs at that point. Like he hadn't even signed with Ole Miss yet. We weren't even at early signing day because I just loved the way he played. I thought he was a really good, he was definitely raw, but I just loved the tools that I saw. I loved the speed, the fact that they used him in the slot and outside in high school. Like I was always all in. And I remember Austin was like, this guy, like, I don't know. And Austin did come around on him. But we were definitely the highest on him than anywhere else we were at Campus to Can. We had him as a tier 2 running back, and I should have pushed for him to be tier 1, but I didn't, and that's fine because he still ended up ranked very highly for us. But I think it's a great move for Ohio State. I put in on the thumbnail the next Zeke. I don't think he's Zeke Elliott, but I do think he's going to bring that physical, tough running back that Zeke had at Ohio State. We haven't had that the past couple of years. For me, Ohio State's offense has become very finesse over the past couple of years with Ryan Day, and they've kind of missed having that bruising, just beat you up running back that can hand the ball to, 200-something times a game, like Quinshon has done the past 2 years for Ole Miss, and just beat and bully defenders in front of him. And I think that's what Judkins is going to do. As a true freshman in the SEC, 1,567 rushing yards with 16 touchdowns last year, 1,158 rushing yards with 15 touchdowns. The first SEC running back to score 15 rushing touchdowns in his first 2 seasons since Herschel Walker. That is how special Quinshon has been the past 2 seasons. My opinion, if you don't know, if you're just tuning in, you don't know who Quinshon is, NFL ready already, in my opinion. Footwork has gotten better over the 2 years in college. He strings multiple moves together to make defenders miss. To case in point, finished 7th last year, or 7th in 2022 with 76 missed forced tackles, 5th last year in 23 with 78 missed forced tackles. On top of that, we have him, and multiple other sites have him clocked over 22 miles per hour. He led the SEC in 2022 with the most 10-plus yard rushing plays. It just continues to talk about his explosiveness. Last year, he was top 10 in 23 with 39, even being injured. We showed glimpses, I think, of maturity behind the line of scrimmage. His vision has improved. His patience as well is something I was a little nervous about him coming out of high school. And his decisiveness of knowing when to burst through the line and hit those cutback lanes. Like, I think he's just really stepped up his game. I think he's going to be really good at Ohio State. They were the 89th ranked offense when rushing the ball last year, but they had the 44th ranked offensive line. So, they have the guys who can block. Travion, Mayan, Chip, and Dallin Hayden just weren't doing enough. And a lot of that was because of injuries. Chip got beat up toward the end of the year. Mayan out most of the year. Travion beat up a bunch of the year. And again, Judkins did suffer with injuries, but I think if he comes back and is healthy this year, he's just going to be a massive piece for that Ohio State offense. I think it's going to help out Howard as well, not be so one-dimensional because they're not going to have that Marvin Harrison to throw the ball to. Even if Mecca comes back, he's not Marvin Harrison. Carnell Tate, not Marvin Harrison. Like, they're going to have a more balanced attack, which they did this year. It was very close to 50-50 running and passing the ball, and I think they will do that again. And I'm excited. I really am. I think Judkins is going to do great things for the Ohio State offense. And I don't think that this necessarily means Travion Henderson is for sure going to the NFL. He has yet to make that announcement. As of the time of this recording, we have 6 days. You have till January 15th. It is January 9th, the day that I'm recording this. We have yet to still hear anything from Henderson. If Henderson does come back, it definitely hurts both their fantasy values. Again, in Campus to Canton leagues, you can start these guys, play them on Saturdays or whatever day they play, Fridays, Thursdays, and win your college side with these guys. If Travion comes back, I never think it's going to muck things up a little bit. But if he goes, I still think Ohio State's going to be fine. The depth of the room is going to be challenged a little bit. They're really only going to have the 3 players. It's going to be Judkins, Dallin Hayden, and James Peoples, a true freshman. But Hayden's been really good. I think those two can play off each other. And I actually think we'll see James Peoples get a lot of run because I think Dallin Hayden and Judkins do a little bit of the same thing at times. So we'll see what happens with Travion Henderson. If he does come back, I think it's going to be a pretty dynamic duo. I mean, look at what they were 2 years ago, not 2023, but in 2022, when Mayan Williams looked like at times he was taking over that backfield, even though he didn't, because he was that thunder to Travion Henderson's lightning. I don't think it's unfair to say Quinshawn is a decent step above Mayan Williams. That could be a really fun duo to watch, and I think they will lead Ohio State to good things in 2024. A couple NFL draft declarations. Jason McClellan, which I was not expecting. He's leaving Alabama, heading to the NFL draft. This is just great news for Justice Haynes. I mean, you got Jam Miller there, who was technically the number 2. I think it's going to be a split between those two. We were concerned with Jace maybe coming back. They were still going to be running this 3-headed monster. I think Justice Haynes is the better running back. I think we could actually see him take over as the lead of this committee over even Jam Miller. You know, Nick Saban is not the one to talk very highly of freshmen, and he was touting Justice Haynes pretty heavily in spring last year. It'll be a big battle to watch this spring on how that kind of shakes out between him and Jam Miller with McClellan going to the NFL draft. I like McClellan. Just has not ever seemed to be the same from the injuries. I think he's probably a day 3 pick. You know, I hope he goes round 4 because that's still pretty good draft capital for a running back, and I think he can be fine at the NFL level. He's a guy probably, you know, in dynasty leagues, if you're talking rookie drafts, I'll probably take in the 3rd round, maybe 4th if he falls there, which he could, especially if he falls in the NFL draft. Because I think the talent's there. It's just been the injuries. He's unfortunately not been able to stay healthy. Jalen Polk, also Washington wide receiver, heads to the draft, probably a day 2 pick as well. You know, arguments all over the college football landscape. Who's better? We all know Rome Odunze is the one. But who's the number 2 in that offense? Is it Jalen Polk? Is it Jalen McMillan? McMillan is yet to announce. I think he is going to go to the NFL. I think all 3 of those guys are going to be drafted by round 3 or at least before day 3 starts. So it's going to be a great win for Washington there. Jeremiah Hunter, Mike Fowler, I mentioned him earlier, one of our Devi guys here, is a big fan of Jeremiah Hunter. He transferred up from Cal to Washington. 63 catches for 731 yards and 7 touchdowns next year. It seems like him and Jeremy Bernard are going to be the guys. Washington's got a pretty tough schedule next year, and I don't know what to think about that offense with Will Rogers at quarterback. I trust Kalen DeBoer, so I think Washington is going to overall be fine, but I don't think they're going to have quite the season they had this year, going 14-0, making it to the national championship. On the last C2C Live, I talked a little bit about Jaden Maava, the UNLV quarterback, true freshman, had a pretty good season. Completed 224 passes out of 353, which equaled a 63.5 completion percentage for 3,085 yards, 17 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Also added 277 yards on the ground with 3 touchdowns. I thought he was a really good player in the Mountain West, really good player for UNLV. He ends up going to Georgia, which is interesting to me because I don't know that he's the next guy up. But Carson Beck's obviously going to start there, and I'll just, you know, spoiler alert, have Georgia being the number 1 seed and winning the SEC in 2024. He's not coming in for Beck. I don't think he's better than Stetson Bennett. Not Stetson Bennett, I'm sorry. Oh, my goodness, I just lost his name. But, yeah, that guy. The backup quarterback who will be behind Carson Beck now that for the life of me, I cannot remember. If you're in the chat, please bail me out because now I cannot – I used to love this kid too. But anyways, I don't think Maava is going to even be the backup. He's likely going to be the 3rd string quarterback, and I don't think that he gets the Gunnar Stockton. That's what I was looking for. Gunnar Stockton. I think Gunnar Stockton's next man up. So I don't know. I was just coming in here to maybe NIL to help fill out the room in case Beck gets hurt. I don't know. We'll see. It was a weird place for me. I didn't think USC. I liked USC because he was going to be with Lincoln Riley. I thought this was a little bit overblown, and the 2 places he unfortunately decided to go. All right, last thing here. We're almost at 30 minutes. I wanted to make this a little bit of a shorter stream for you guys. The 2024 playoff field. So this is how I have it go. I'm going to give you the whole thing, not just the top 12 seeds, but I'm going to give you who I think then goes into what matchups and who ends up going on from there and giving you a national champion. So the number 1 seed, I have Georgia going undefeated. Very tough schedule. Texas, Alabama. Who else do they have? Ole Miss on here. They have a very tough schedule. I think they find a way to go undefeated, win the SEC, so they get your number 1 seed. Number 2 seed, I'm going with Ohio State. I battled back and forth with who I thought was going to win the Big Ten, and spoiler alert, the other team was not Michigan, and I'll tell you why in a minute. This is, I think, a massive year for Ryan Day. I think he's going all in. He's making a ton of coaching changes. He's bringing in Judkins, brings in Howard at quarterback. They were not a bad team, despite what everybody thinks. They were, again, had a chance to drive down the field and beat Michigan on the final drive with Kyle McCord. And if they do that, I don't know that they're in the national championship against Washington, but they're in the playoffs. So I think the losses are obviously big for them, but they're bringing back some key defensive players. We have still yet to hear if JT Tuimoloau is coming back. If he comes back, that's even bigger for Ohio State. The defense is going to be fine. I think they are currently right there. There's 3 teams in Tier 1 for me in the Big Ten. It's Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan. And I think Ohio State's going to find a way. They'll have to beat Oregon because they do play Oregon this year, and I think they will. And that is why they end up winning the Big Ten. Number 3, I have Arizona coming in as the Big 12 champions with 1 loss. I think they lose to Utah in the regular season, but then beat Utah in the Big 12 championship to make it to the top 4 seed. Remember, all of these conferences are going to no more divisions. It's the best 2 teams. I'll just, spoiler alert, Utah is also in the playoff. I have them as also one of the best teams in the Big 12. My number 4 seed, the ACC winner, Florida State. I do have them losing to Clemson in the regular season. They play each other in the regular season. They do have Cal, Stanford, and SMU joining the conference this year, but I think that they will lose to Clemson, but then re-win or whatever, avenge that loss in the championship game against Clemson, which one ends up giving them the ACC championship, making them the 4th seed. So reminder, with this new 12-team format, the top 4 teams get byes. So Georgia, Ohio State, Arizona, and Florida State will not play in week 1. It goes to all the at-large teams. So here are my at-large bids for 2024. At 5, I have Texas. I have them coming in with 1 loss, the loss to Georgia. I have them losing to Georgia at home. Georgia going into the 40 acres, beating Texas. I think it's going to be a close game. But why Texas the 5 seed? Because they have I think they have 3 massive wins. They win against Michigan in the Big House in week 2. Massive game for Texas next year. Them beating OU and Texas A&M, who I think bounces back a little bit this next year. Number 6, the next at-large bid I have as Oregon. Their big wins, Michigan and Washington, but they lose to Ohio State. I think that they likely... So I have them losing to... dang it. I can't remember. I had this all played out. They don't make the Big Ten championship game. I don't remember why, but that's why they don't have the 2 losses to Ohio State, but they do have the loss to Ohio State in the regular season. Number 7, Ole Miss, another at-large win. Big wins against LSU and Oklahoma, but they have an early, and they have a very easy schedule, by the way, guys. You look at that schedule, the hardest teams they play are LSU and Georgia. So I have them winning against LSU and Georgia. I do have them beating Alabama as well, but I think Alabama's going to be a little bit down this year. I'm not believing in Jalen Milroe. At 8, I have LSU. So that is 3 SEC teams making the playoffs. LSU, another at-large team, big wins against USC, who they open the season with, Alabama and OU, but they lose to Ole Miss, which is why Ole Miss comes in ranked 1 spot ahead of them. At 9, I have Utah. Again, I have them beating Arizona in the regular season, but losing to them in the Big 12 championship. At 10, I have Clemson. While they have a big win against Florida State, they lose to Florida State in the ACC championship. They also play Georgia week 1 for the Chick-fil-A kickoff series, and it is in Georgia. It's in the Peach Bowl, which I know is not technically a home game for Georgia, but it kind of is a home game for Georgia. I think Clemson loses that. So 2 big losses, but they still make the playoffs as the 10 seed. I flip back and forth between who my 11 and 12 seed were going to be. 11 seed, I went ahead and went with the G5 at-large, which I'm giving to Boise State. That's why Oregon. I think that they beat Oregon, or they lose to Oregon, but it's a very close game. If they beat Oregon and go undefeated, I don't think there's any way they're left out. To me, it comes down between Boise State and Tulane, but I think Boise State is going to be the better team. They win the Mountain West. They only have the 1 loss to Oregon. They get it in, and the reason I put them in at 11 is because my 3-loss team, this was why I was trying to remember why I had them Oregon with only the 1 loss. Nope, that doesn't make sense. I messed that up, but that's all right. We're still going to continue. Michigan coming in as the 12 seed with 3 losses. Their big wins against USC and Washington, but I do have them losing to Ohio State twice and Oregon. Those are the three teams. So that technically would have put Oregon and Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. That's where I messed up. I had Michigan going back and playing Ohio State and losing to them twice. So, and the only reason I think that Michigan is not quite on Ohio State and Oregon's levels, again, they're losing a lot of players. They're possibly going to break the NFL draft record for most players drafted in a single year in a draft with all the players that will be going to the NFL. I think there's a shot that JJ McCarthy goes. I do think Jim Harbaugh is gone. And if that happens, they're leaning on Alex Orji because I don't think Jaden Davis is ready to lead Michigan. So I still think that's giving Michigan a lot of credit, taking Alex Orji and making the playoffs next year. So how that sets up. Remember, the higher seeds get home games or they get to pick a neutral field of their choice. I would assume most of these teams will host the playoff game. So in the first round of the playoffs, we will get Texas hosting Michigan. That is going to be a fun game. It'll be a rematch, obviously. We're going to have a couple rematches on here. There'll be a rematch of what happens in game 2, except Texas went up to the Big House and beats Michigan. I'll just say it now. I think Texas beats them at the 40 acres. So Texas advances hosting Michigan in the first round of the playoffs. Gives us Oregon, Boise State. Oregon hosting Boise State. Again, a rematch for earlier in the season. I think Oregon does it again, beats them at Autzen Stadium. That gives us then Ole Miss hosting Clemson, and I think Ole Miss finds a way to beat Clemson, and then LSU hosting Utah. I think LSU handles Utah pretty easily, and LSU moves on. So again, first round matchups in the playoffs for me in 2024. Texas hosting Michigan, Texas wins. Oregon hosting Boise State, Oregon wins. Ole Miss hosting Clemson, Ole Miss wins. LSU hosting Utah, LSU wins. Then that gives us in the second round an LSU versus Georgia matchup. Georgia hosting them. I think Georgia finds a way to beat LSU. Florida State hosting Texas. Texas beats Florida State to move on into the Final Four. Oregon versus Arizona, an old Pac-12 matchup. Obviously now Big 10 versus Big 12. Oregon finding a way to beat Arizona in what I think will be a very fun game. And then Ole Miss versus Ohio State. Quinshon Judkins going up against his old team and his old coach. It's funny how that stuff lines up, right? And Judkins finds a way with the Buckeyes to beat Ole Miss at home at the Shoe to move on, which then gives us an SEC matchup and a Big Ten matchup in the Final Four where Georgia hosts Texas and Ohio State hosts Oregon. I think Georgia finds a way to then again beat Texas once again to move on to the national championship, and Ohio State beats Oregon once again, giving us a Georgia versus Ohio State matchup. Carson Beck. Oh, man, why did that whole team just like jump out of my head? I was trying to think. Roderick Robinson, a phenomenal defense. Kirby Smart going up against Howard, Judkins, Ryan Day, and I think, unfortunately, and for game they should have won last year with C.J. Stroud. The kicker misses it. Ohio State, your 2024 National Championship. You heard it here first on January 9th, 2024. And in 2025, January, whatever it's going to be. It's going to be a little bit later because we have an extra round of playoffs. Your Ohio State Buckeyes are going to be lifting that national championship. Ryan Day is not going to be fired. All you Buckeye fans freaking out are going to love him. Best thing since sliced bread is better than Urban Meyer, better than Jim Tressel, better than... Yeah, you don't ever say better than Woody. That is sacrilege. But regardless, Ohio State, your 2024 national champions. You heard it here first. I am not at all biased with the hoodie and the jerseys behind me. Don't mind all that. We'll be back again later this week. You guys have a great day.